Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thanks again for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. Taking another look here at Bitcoin, seeing if, well, hey, first of all, is this pullback going to happen already, or are we just going to be stuck in this range of 74,000 forever before it either breaks up or down? Those are things we're going to talk about. There's a lot of confirming factors that downside makes more sense, specifically spot volume kind of running flat for the most part, and perpetual futures increasing. This is not a great sign. This is generally a sign of weakness because it leads to situations like this where we have what, $1 billion in liquidation essentially in 10 minutes. Like we got an unusual buy or sell activity here earlier today that was roughly about an hour ago. So those things happen consistently. While we can and have been taking profits on our trades, they're like tighter margins. You can't like hold a trade open for a long period right now because those runners, it's hard to catch those runners because there's so much conflicting information, folks. I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy world right now. So be careful trading right now. I would say FOMOing into a long doesn't make a ton of sense, just based on the simple fact that there's way more reasons for the price to pull back. Why it hasn't yet already, I don't know, but it's one of those things we're going to kind of take a closer look at and find out, mostly on the back end data. So we'll take a look at that and much more. Be sure to stick around. All right, folks, before we jump into the back end data, quick reminder, please hit the like button, comment below if you get a chance. Don't forget to join us over on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord. Have some really awesome communities over there as well. And more importantly, when it comes to the back end data here, we want to kind of focus a little bit more specifically on basically the spot trading rather versus futures. Now, when we look at spots, there's a lot of reasons why the likelihood of the price action pulling back is higher, because when spot outflows are high, the price generally goes with it. All right, at least the same thing goes with inflows too, to the upside, right? So just keep in mind, there is definitely some factors there we want to pay attention to. Basically, the delta for perpetual futures is up, where delta spot is running sideways. So when you have that imbalance, it doesn't show a lot of strength. It shows kind of false strength because futures doesn't really determine what happens with the price action entirely, right? Spot volume has a little bit more weight to it. Obviously, once again, that can change quickly because perpetual futures, there's a lot of liquidation that can occur. So when we generally look at this here, we can see, and again, this is a 15-minute chart. This is only ever since the price pulled back about an hour ago, right? So this isn't like a super amazing situation, but it's a smaller time frame thing I like to pay attention to. When we have an increase in perpetual futures, that shows that people are buying the dip with high leverage, when a future, or basically spot, is not, right? So that basically suggests that people aren't interested, or at least more likelihood, the likelihood of these market makers or whales that move the price, they're not interested in buying in this level here, that the price is running flat. However, when perpetual futures go higher, that really tells us a lot about the simple fact that it's a false positive, kind of letting us know that this recovery is likely going to fizzle out. So those are just kind of things I like to look for in lower timeframes when I'm considering entry. Somebody in my community asked me that recently. When it comes to spot order, or sorry, order books rather, it's not a ton of like imbalances here. You can see 76,000 is heavily guarded. There's really big chunks up there, but you could really say the same thing at about 73,000. So simple way to understand it, we're right in the middle of that range. 76 to 73,000 is essentially the upper and lower range of protection, so to speak, when it comes to those orders. There isn't any super unusual buying here outside that large wick down that we saw, that $1 billion sell on Binance futures. We can see some normal large sell orders at about 75,000. So that is creating that resistance for us here. I'm leaning towards 75,000 being kind of that area of confluence above the price. More likelihood than not, we're going to see that rejection there. In other words, when we look at the regular timeframes here, this is a 12-hour, for example, we can see a pretty obvious, definitive inability to close above that level. Okay, so that to me is very substantial. That's something you have to pay attention to. 75K for right now until we can close soundly above that for a handful of candles. There's no reason to presume that that's going to be broken. It's likely going to be a rejection spot and the price will pull back. There's also fair value gaps below the price, so please understand this. A lot of value below the price here. The price moved up too quickly without any profits being taken, and market makers know that. They're gonna seek that liquidation, or that liquidity rather, right? So it's one of those things where you just gotta be kind of careful taking along at the top right now. Even though it could break out and it has some signs that it should, there's way more signs pointing down, just kind of for obvious reasons here. So taking a look here. Liquidation, this is one of those, right? We saw a quick wick down just to sweep that lower area of liquidity at about 73,400. But there's still a big chunk between 71,000 and 73.3. Okay, so please understand, it's a very, very solid amount of liquidation. Each one of these bars represents close to about half to a full billion in liquidation. Okay, so that's kind of a lot. Now, when it comes to the overall circumstance in the back end here, the thing to also recognize is that open interest is heavy at 73 to 72,000. So expecting the price just to blast straight through those ranges the first attempt is pretty low, or low probability rather. It's kind of naive because there's a lot of basically a lot of support in that range, right? So that support kind of reaffirms the fact that we're more likely to either bounce off that area or spend more time in that range before it breaks through. We're going to need to see a large fundamental catalyst in order for that level to be hit. Again, the same thing goes for breaking 76,000 as well, right? We're going to need a significant fundamental catalyst. Between now and then, it's like, hey, do we have good news or bad news? That's really what we're waiting on. It's kind of a weird, stupid place. I don't really like this kind of trading conditions. The last 2 to 3 weeks have been very funky in trading. Now, don't get me wrong, ever since ETF approval, it's been pretty bad too. That's just the bottom line. But the truth is right now, the way that things are, it's very difficult to trust the price action because we're seeing these really strange, unique patterns. Every time you think it's going to go down, it goes the opposite. You could almost apply a contrarian concept here to trading and it would work, right? Why is negative news in the world a positive sign for crypto? It doesn't make any sense, right? Inverse as well. Anyways, all that being said, 12-hour time frame leads me to believe that we are going to reject out, or we already have it, of course, but the likelihood of breaking through that range is still pretty low. Once more, it can totally happen. The longer we spend in this range, the more likely it is to break too. So you got to recognize that. I don't love these situations whatsoever. Right? I think I've reiterated that a few times. What I mean by that, and I'm trying to confirm the fact that, to my subscribers who are watching, those of you who are in my community, you got to understand that I'm sending less signals right now because the market is very difficult to interpret. Okay, we got pumps and dumps all over the place. You got to kind of find those smaller wins, and that's generally what we're looking for. But once more, when we're on the kind of the edge of greatness or disaster, we got to wait for a direction to be picked first, right? Do you want to trade in the direction of the trend? Yes, the trend is up technically, but we're also trending upwards into a key level resistance. So it's really just a big bag of who knows what the heck's going to happen. Either way, a larger time frame fair value gap has been filled. We're over 50 on the RSI. That's generally a favorable sign. Look at the 4-hour time frame. It is tapering off. It's cooling down. It's resetting. Generally speaking, if we can surpass or basically maintain 50 on the RSI without losing this local support of 73.7, then we're in pretty good shape. In other words, there's a good chance that we do end up progressing a bit higher here based on this range here holding and looking pretty strong, right? 73.7. We can continue to hold that level. The likelihood of further upside is becoming greater, okay? So I know it's kind of terrible to think about that, especially if you're in a short position. But once more, we got to be realistic here that, the longer we hold this range, the more likely it is to break. Okay, so what we need is a quick flush down. Me personally, looking at the back end with spot underperforming versus perpetual futures, that leads me to believe there's an imbalance, and that imbalance is kind of false. It's more likely than not just market makers allowing late longs to continue to pile in, and they're going to dump pretty hard at some point or another. It should happen soon. I'd be surprised more so if the price goes up than down. But once more, the longer we spend in this range, the more likely that is to happen too. So it's quickly becoming a coin flip. What's going to happen next? Tell me, what kind of coin are you using? And you think we're going to go heads or tails? I'd love to hear it. Anyways, comment below. All jokes aside, this market is pretty terrible. So, the truth is, if you're having trouble right now, it's not unusual. Okay. So try not to overthink it. Oftentimes the best strategies right now is to basically stay on the sidelines and wait for a definitive direction to be chosen. In other words, when the price starts moving down, we break this local range here. That might be a better consideration for a short than to try to get in early right now, because the price could very well wick up and squeeze you out. All right, just crazy stuff, but that's the market we're in. All right, hope this made sense. Comment below if you get a chance. Let's take a look at the next one. All right, folks, quick look here at Ethereum. Just kind of talking a little bit more specifically about the ranges that we need to pay attention to. We saw an aggressive wick down. That's when Bitcoin pulled back. ETH has been on the overextended side versus most other altcoins, so it's going to be the first one to fall. I kind of mentioned that recently, even though it's more risky to short this coin, how strong it is, it has more propensity to lose too because of how strong it is, right? It's one of those things. Anyways, 2250 is that area of interest for me. Obviously, depends on how Bitcoin performs, but that's one of those areas that has a lot of confluence. So just be mindful that 2250, there's a good chance that we see a pivot or bounce there. More importantly, at this $2,000 range right here, or sorry, 2200 rather, that $2,200 range has a ton of open interest and volume there. So there's a great chance that that's also a secondary support. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Let's take a quick look here at Bitcoin versus Ethereum. So this is kind of, let's go ahead and go with the lower time frames, 1 hour time frame. And we're just going to quickly draw a comparison between these two coins, right? And really, when you look at these two coins, you can see ETH is struggling versus Bitcoin. They're both pulling back and doing pretty much in a lot of ways the same thing, but for the most part, I don't really love this kind of price action. Okay, in other words, simple way to understand it, I don't really like trading coins that are like exactly the same as Bitcoin, because if Bitcoin pulls back, it's going to do the same thing. In a lot of ways, Ethereum is mirroring Bitcoin. So outside those key level supports that we've already identified, there's not too much else really here to note for any outliers. Backend data might say something different. Let's double check. We are looking at right around 2 billion in liquidation long delta, which is cut in half essentially, where Bitcoin's still on the stronger side. And we also want to see here with liquidation, there's still more liquidation to the downside. So I don't think we're going to see 2100 necessarily, but I do think that if Bitcoin runs towards 70K or we see 70,000, that's a pretty distinct probability. So really, what's your bias towards Bitcoin? Do you think Bitcoin's going to pull back? If so, then ETH will too. That's kind of how you want to trade it right now. Okay. Anyways, nothing super exciting there. Once more, there is some fair value to the downside, more propensity for this coin to go lower, but that really just depends on your outlook on Bitcoin. Quick heads up to our traders, we got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, quick look here at Solana. And Solana is performing quite strong, quite well here. A lot of jagged behavior, but essentially consolidating nicely at its halfway point on this current range. So generally speaking, that's what you want to look for. When the price ranges, then it picks kind of a side. That's usually when it breaks out to that direction. Okay, we're also seeing a descending trend line here, essentially a test of that. So good chance Solana does continue to progress higher based on lower time frame, benefit here, so to speak, versus Bitcoin. As you can see on the left, Bitcoin pulled back, bounced a little bit, where Solana essentially bounced and didn't pull back the second time. So this is what happened. We saw a significant a significant retracement there for the price action for Bitcoin. Right, Bitcoin 7 a.m. today pulled back, hit that low $73,000 mark. Solana bounced back instantly and wants to recover, where Bitcoin is still kind of on the struggle bus, right? So that does show strength, and that does incentivize the price to go higher on the short term. So let's see if any good targets to consider. Once more, I mentioned yesterday, 90 to 91 is kind of that area of open interest. That's just really close to the previous local high, right? So the local high range there outside of the current is essentially that previous retest we'd see here. So liquidation delta is still in the green, which is great. From a liquidation standpoint, we could see 80, we could see 88. Those are two kind of ranges there for us. So Solana is one of those weird ones that it has a tendency of really deceiving a lot of people. Anytime you feel like you want to short it, it just takes off, and the inverse as well. This coin is one of those heavily manipulated coins, so I trade it a lot less nowadays than I used to, just based on how funky the price action is. But either way, funky or not, this does show bullish strength, and there's decent propensity for further upside if Bitcoin holds its current range. So Bitcoin goes sideways for the next couple of days, Solana's going to probably hit 90. That's really what it boils down to. Just keep in mind, if Bitcoin does pull back as per usual, we will see those lower $80 ranges for Solana, but I think that's less likely at this exact moment under the impression Bitcoin doesn't dump, right? Either way, there's going to be a certain point where Solana starts, pairing itself with Bitcoin, it pulls back with it. For right now, it's showing strength, and you want to kind of go with the grain here. All right. So I wouldn't say betting against Solana right now is not the greatest call, even though this resistance range here is pretty significant. This does look like this feels a little different, just depending on how Bitcoin moves here moving forward. All right, folks, quick look here at SUI. SUI is also another one of those coins right now. It's looking like it wants to take off. I mentioned yesterday, don't short this coin. Certainly looking like $1 is a distinct possibility. And what is it? We just came up to about 99 cents and rejected here recently. So good news. That basically tells us that we're more likely to go higher. Bad news is probably swept all that liquidation there. And there might, actually, I think there might be some left between 1 and 105. We'll double check that, but look at this pattern here. Higher highs and higher lows, Bitcoin, lower lows, lower highs. What happens if Bitcoin hits higher highs and higher lows? SUI will probably take off to that 105 to 110 mark. So This coin definitely looks very strong. I'm apprehensive to want to take along with it just based on the simple fact that it does feel like Bitcoin's gonna pull back. It's kind of got that vibe right now. But once more, Bitcoin's been the ultimate deceiver lately, right? Spot volume's low, generally a sign of weakness, price goes up, right? There's not a lot of sense to be made from Bitcoin. But good news is SUI is performing better versus it. So even if Bitcoin pulls back, it's a good chance it goes higher anyways, right? So liquidation long delta is good. We can see we're kind of tentatively breaking that range. 96 cents is that upper resistance of the current range. So the longer we spend there, the more likely we are to see $1 plus. $1.01 is that heavy area of liquidation on the upside, and still more about 87.85 below. Okay, so the uber cautious will wait for Bitcoin to pull back, consider long in the 85 to 90 cent range, and the adventurous will take a long right now, essentially to that 105 range, because SUI is performing better than Bitcoin. That's the bottom line. Okay, so just keep that in mind. This doesn't necessarily mean you should take a long. It's technically less risky to take a long right now with this coin versus that of a short. But once more, Bitcoin's on the edge of greatness or disaster right now. So you choose. You let me know. Comment below. Are you long or short on SUI? Very curious to hear that. All right, folks, quick look here at XRP. And as mentioned yesterday and the day before, you don't want to bet against this coin right now. It's certainly looking like it wants to make a run towards 146, 148, based on breaking local ranges, but also there's not a lot of open interest above the price. I'll talk about that here in a minute, but if you look at the side-by-side with XRP versus Bitcoin on the left, we see an obvious lower low pattern for Bitcoin and the inverse for that of XRP. Now, what goes up must come down at some point. Got to keep that in mind, right? But for the most part, these are pretty obvious strength signs here, letting us know that XRP is not one to you don't want to kind of consider shorting this coin just yet. There might be a window of opportunity at some point if Bitcoin pulls back, but right now it's working itself out of the trenches, certainly looking pretty good. From an open interest perspective, once more, 148 is that area of confluence above, but below, there's a lot of support. Okay, so that support range continues to build. That's a good sign. Liquidation delta is extremely high, and there's not a lot of liquidation above the price. So longs are in complete control, and there's really no reason to try to bet against this coin. Now, you got to recognize we're reaching somewhat of an overextended state on this lower time frame convergence. So that kind of lets me know that it may be kind of risky to consider long at this exact moment, but there's more propensity for further upside. We're above our halfway point there with the range that we're in. And also, when we look at this point of control, we're tentatively above that as well. I want to emphasize the word tentative because the daily candlestick hasn't closed yet. So we haven't really confirmed that we've broken that range. But if Bitcoin were to continue to maintain 74,000, I think 148, even higher, is very likely for XRP in the relative near future. So I'd be cautious trying to take a long, but also be mindful that if Bitcoin doesn't pull back, then XRP is a good candidate for further upside. So once more, mostly a very tentative, I want to emphasize that, a very tentative bullish scenario here for XRP, but it's still a larger statistical favorability of further upside. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Thanks again so much for being an amazing part of my life. I look forward to seeing the next one. Have a good rest of your day.